There's two sides to every coin. Then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks. And some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fist at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back down, sports clown. It's all just a game, and it's the last down, let down, cowtown. I said it's all just a game. I give the touchdown, the rundown, the lowdown. 'Cause it's over the game, gonna crack down and shut down the sundown. I said it's all just a game.
I guess this makes me somewhat of a narcissist, but man, I love my theme song. First theme song I've ever had. No, it's over. You missed it. We'll get it for you later. But yeah, I've never had a theme song before. I know. But thanks to Tory Doctor and Off Beaten Path Productions for that. Welcome. Hi, everybody. It's Friday. I'm you. No, you're you. I'm me. It's just a game. Of course, brought to you by our good friends at Ski Cellar Snowboard. We, of course, are broadcasting live from Treaty 7 Nation territory, and we are welcoming everyone. This is an inclusive podcast. Everyone is welcome here, regardless of creed, race, religion, orientations, sexual preference, any of that. Just come. Let's have some fun. Let's talk a little bit today. My mom's favorite reporter is on the show. My mom's favorite reporter. Get into that in a little while. Also, David Legg from Mount Royal University. We will do a deep dive on the arena announcement. By the way, didn't know we needed it, but we got it. The Oilers responded today, so we'll get into that. So who knew? But before we get to our first guest, let's take a look back at the East and the West in the NHL, as it, of course, we're in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and good Lord, don't call them the NHL playoffs. They are the Stanley Cup playoffs. So if we take a look out at the East right now, Boston in Florida tonight can close off that series. We'll get to the Maple Leafs and Tampa in a second. Leafs still lead that series. Also, the Islanders trying to stave off elimination at home against Carolina tonight. And Jersey. Okay, a week ago, mea culpa. A week ago, some donkey in this chair said, well, they got to learn how to lose first before they win in the playoffs. Down 2-0. This will be good for them. Next year, they'll learn something. They're up 3-2. We'll get to that in a second. Give me the West for a second. Let's take a look at the West. Yes, Winnipeg went home. Vegas, 4 straight after losing the first game. And there's a lot of reasons, and they're going to dissect it. That autopsy will be messy. But that first game, man, Winnipeg looked like, but I think it was, we found out, it was more Vegas looked like nothing, they're no good. Put it back up, Gap. I'm a one guy. There we go. Thank you. How about this? The defending Stanley Cup champions facing elimination on the road tonight in Seattle. Dallas can knock off Minnesota tonight in Minnesota. And tomorrow night, the Oilers can knock off the Kings. That game 6 in Los Angeles. All right, let's talk about first my mea culpa. How about this dude? How about this guy? Because, of course, we were all waiting for the ascension of Schmidt. When's he coming? When are they going to give him a chance? Well, the Devils gave this kid a chance. Look at this. 3 games. He's 3-0. His goals against just a tidy .63. So that save percentage, .976. There are 3 goalies in the history of the New Jersey Devils that have shutouts in the playoffs. Of course, Marty Brodeur has billions of them. Sean Burke would be the other one. And now Akira Schmidt. Of course, you can fill in that on your bingo card. Just an unbelievable story. He has been terrific. And as I say, last week, it just looked like look like. All those other series we used to see before. Oh, you got to lose. And then you learn how to win. Young team, they hadn't been in the playoffs in a while. And the Rangers just blew the doors off the Devils in Newark. But Schmidt gets to start. And guess what? You got a little something going on there. Who knows how long it'll last. But right now, the Devils go back to Madison Square Garden in the driver's seat. All right. Now, this is going to sound and feel like piling on. And it is. Take a look at this. This one I love. Gav did some amazing work on this board. So the Maple Leafs up 3-1, now up 3-2. Toronto in closeout games since 2013, 0-11. 0-11 since 2013. Now, two cracks at it. I still think they got a better than average shot. You know, they're leading the series, but you know that this is like a little earwig. It's right in their ear. They're hearing all of it. They know all of it. They're reminded of all of it. You know, now all of a sudden they're not playing on, you know, 1.5 inches ice. They're playing on 1 centimeter of ice, and it's going to break underneath. You can just tell. Now, they win. They exercise the demons, the big exhale. Dubas is a genius, and they move on to the next round. But since 2013, 0-11 in elimination games, including being up on Montreal. Remember, they were up on Montreal, I think 3-0, or no, 3-1. Anyway, they lost that series. And similar situation, they'd be in this one. All right, why waste any more time? Let's get to our first guest, brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard. 76 years in Calgary, 3 locations: McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, 17th Avenue Southwest, just off of 14th Street, Bow Ridge Road Northwest by McDonald's, at the bottom of the hill by Windsport. He is from Post Media, as mentioned, at least in my world, my claim to fame. He's my mom's favorite reporter, but he's also my favorite reporter. He has been on the Flames beat for almost a decade now. Wes Gilbertson joins us. What?
Me being your mom's favorite reporter is not your claim to fame. That's my claim to fame.
I'm sorry. Is that okay? I thought it was mine.
You're going to have to get your own.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm looking desperately for a claim to fame. I have yet to find it.
Well, I just picked mine up, so.
No, I've told you that before. How are you, by the way?
I'm good, buddy. How about yourself?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming in. I know we tried, but we always call it, hey, why don't you come in today? It's Green Garbage Bag Day. Like, why don't you pick a day which is not,
Today's a good day.
But having said that, you're working tonight, aren't you?
I think, I'll go watch some Wranglers hockey.
Yeah, okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were at game 1 on Wednesday?
I was, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't the best hockey game you've seen in your life. The locals hadn't played in 11 days, and you could tell.
Yeah.
But listen, there's some kids there to get excited about, led by obviously the guy in net and Dustin Wolf, the AHL MVP, and it was fun to watch. I was hoping to see a few more people at the Saddle Dome on Wednesday. I think they drew just under 6,000.
Okay.
Sounds like it's going to be a lot more than that tonight, and that'll be fun. This is a team that deserves the support.
Yeah, and especially after languishing in Stockton for all those years and really, kind of away from everything, right? 6,000 is a miracle, but we all both know, and we've been around. We know when the Hitmen go on a long run, usually it's about the second or third run that it kicks in, and then it becomes a spectacle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And languishing not only in Stockton geographically, but we talked about it, and you and I, I'm sure, have had the conversation a million times over the years. This is an organization that did not have a lot of guys in the minors to be excited about.
No.
For a long time.
No.
And so, to have Dustin Wolf there, to have Jacob Pelche there, unfortunately, I think Matthew Phillips is probably no longer a Flames prospect after this summer when he hits unrestricted free agency. But there's a guy that people in this city where he grew up, played midget AAA, should still be excited about. Connor Zary's and another guy on the rise there. And so not only do you finally have the future of the Flames in your own backyard, but like
there is
some
a future.
Legitimate prospects there. We're not talking about a bunch, and they have some journeymen. There's lots of guys who've played in the NHL. I think Brett Sutter as their captain is a remarkable story. And yet the reason there will be 10,000 people there tonight and hopefully more down the road, and I'm just ballparking those numbers, I don't know, but it's because of those kids that are the future of this team.
Yeah.
Dustin Wolf was the best player the other night.
Yep.
Jacob Pelche scores in overtime.
Yep. What about Jeremy Poirier, the defenseman? I don't profess to know a lot of this kid, but you don't accidentally make the all-rookie team on defense, right?
No, you don't. And he's a guy that has a ton of offensive upside. We've known that he's a guy who dropped in the draft because teams wondered if he could defend. And to be frank, I think teams wondered if he cared to defend sometimes.
Sure.
And the Flames have really dug in on that part development wise. I know every time I talk to Jeremy, as you know, in the media, you're typically talking to these guys because they've done something offensively.
Yeah, it's
right?
true.
They scored 2 goals or they just had a big weekend or they were named to the all rookie team. He's worked really hard on the defensive bit. And I thought the amount that he played, obviously in overtime, you need to score a goal as well. But I thought the amount he played in overtime in game 1 was pretty telling. So
Love has trust in him.
Yeah, he's starting to trust him. Now he's out there. He's out there with a veteran. He's not running his own pairing or anything like that.
No.
But this is a 20-year-old defenseman in the second best league in the world, and I think there's a lot to be encouraged about there.
Well, it almost seems like an MO, and maybe it's now an MO of the previous regime, but an MO because Anderson and Shillington both came into that draft falling like rocks too. One because of the shape, and the other one, I think, because I just don't think anybody thought Shillington was going to play defense either, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely.
So it's when you don't get high first round picks, and when you have to make decisions about where you're picking in the first round, it's nice to be able to hit on a few of these.
I mean, they selected a Norris Trophy winner in the 3rd round for very much the same reason.
Yeah,
and obviously, there's a lot more that goes into the Adam Fox story, but these.
Are we allowed to talk about that?
About Adam Fox?
Well, it's just I brought it up. We were talking about tree leaving last week and everything,
Sure.
and I made the comment: what if Adam? What's the legacy of tree living if Adam Fox is here? And all I got was, well, they knew he wasn't. No. That's not the point. I know the history. I know all of that. But man, if that kid, if you kept that kid, drafted that kid, kept that kid, what's the legacy here? Because that's Norris Trophy. It's one thing for Giordano to get it. He was in his 30s. This kid was, 2 years in the league when he won it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to answer your question, at least from my standpoint, I think it's a complicated question because there's two parts that go into it. The trade that brought Elias Lindholm and Noah Hannafin to Calgary is considered one of the more impactful trades, certainly that Brad made as GM, but one of the more impactful trades in, the recent or even not so recent history of the Flames franchise.
I think so, yeah.
And yet I've asked the question over beers with buddies, kind of wondering out loud, could you have got that trade done without Adam Fox? Adam Fox wasn't the reason that the Carolina Hurricanes were making that trade. They wanted Dougie Hamilton. And so I wonder if you could have done that trade a different way. Now, I don't think it was changing the fact that...
Because folks, remember, he never stayed in Carolina either.
Right. He didn't want to be in Carolina.
No.
In fact, Adam Fox didn't just want to play for a handful of teams. Adam Fox wanted to play for one team.
Yep.
He was always going to be a New York Ranger. And
so did Tim Erickson, by the way. I just throw that out there.
Yeah, that one didn't work out quite as well for the Rangers. But I think it's fair to always wonder if you could have leveraged Adam Fox for more from the Rangers. At that point, he was looking like a really good prospect. He wasn't looking like a future Norris Trophy winner. I don't think you would have projected what we see now from Adam Fox. And yet it does complicate, I think, the legacy of Brad Treliving is that based on what I know, he found out recently that Adam Fox wasn't willing to be a Calgary Flame. I don't think he was ever a throw-in in that trade, but I wonder, listen, when a guy goes and is winning Norris trophies elsewhere and you're not sure how to kind of equate what you got for him, it's fair to ask.
Well, and I liked how you phrased it. It's a complicated question. Yeah, it is. And it's intended to be a complicated question. And, to me, it begs to another complicated question because you lost Matthew Tkachuk after his second deal. Why? And I think there's a lot of reasons. I think it's, and this is sexy and flashy to say this week. I think part of it's the arena. You heard Mackenzie Weegar talk about it. It's not the greatest place to go play and work and all of those sort of things. You've seen some of these palatial offices for these players, if you want to call them that. There's some really nice facilities, right?
Absolutely.
So I think there's
ones where you don't have to park outside in winter.
Right. And for us, that seems like, a luxury, but that's what these guys are getting sold on, right? When you come here, what are you touring? What are you touring them? Right now, you're taking them out to Banff and showing them Banff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. That's a part of it. And I think, where Adam Fox and Matthew Tkachuk are so much different, and where the Matthew Tkachuk one is always going to really hurt the people of Calgary is he had a chance to see what makes this such a great city.
Yes.
He had a chance to experience the way that you walk on water in this city when you're one of the Flames star players, the treatment that you get in this city, everything that can come with everything that they want to sell you on about being a Flame. They didn't get that far with Adam Fox because he was just going to be a Ranger.
Right.
And his mind was made up. And I suppose good on him. He was betting on himself that he was going to be a star player and he was going to write his own ticket. Now, would you like if you draft a player and develop him to have him be loyal to your organization? Absolutely. But I think you didn't even get to the part where you can try to sell them on, we get that the rink, you can only say it has character so many times before you're saying it's old.
Yeah.
And so I think what makes the Matthew Tkachuk situation hurt and why the Columbus departure of Johnny Gaudreau will always sting is they saw what people in Calgary want them to see.
Yep.
And they still decided to leave. Adam Fox didn't get that far.
No, he didn't. And again, it's woulda, coulda, shoulda, and all of that stuff. I get that, but as you look at, to me, it's and I don't plan on spending a whole lot of time on the rink with you because I'll get David Legg in for that. Yeah, I understand. No,
those numbers are way over my head.
But it's, to me, it's also it's complicated here. Like, again, if I keep saying again, but if Calgary Next was built the way Calgary Next was proposed, and Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau were playing in that facility, that may have changed it. If there was a different coach, that may have changed it, or maybe it wouldn't have at all. Maybe they just want to be close, as Gaudreau said, close to the biggest children's hospital in America, and Matthew doesn't want to pay any taxes, and he can go to Florida and not pay any taxes. Could be as simple as that.
And this happens in every city. You're always when guys leave, you're looking for reasons, right?
Yeah.
I know there's a sense out there. Well, if they just fired Daryl, then Backlund will want to stay and Lindholm will want to stay. Is it that simple? Is that why they're potentially wavering on their future?
I agree with Rhett Warner. Rhett Warner on the Barn Burner one day, I thought I had a great clip. So it's Daryl's fault. Like, everything's Daryl's fault. Like, it's easy to scapegoat one thing. And to your point, I look at Michael Backlund in the same way, not as a player, but it reminds me a little bit of Bray Bork. Like, he showed loyalty, could never get to where he wanted to go. You know what? I got to go somewhere and try. Yeah. That's what it looks like to me. He's what else is he supposed to do? And the thing that will, and the reason, Wes, you are my mom's favorite reporter, is because you are the best at just telling the story. Very rarely do we get into your opinions, and you're never on social media, which we can get into. But so I'll say this:
as long as I'm not tweeting injury videos from practice, right?
Yeah, no. She's okay with that. It's more of the subtly becoming the advancer of stories that are positive. Just tell me what I need to know. I'll make up my own mind, kind of thing. And for Backlund, I just think, I just think he's should have been the captain, wasn't the captain, probably doesn't want to be coached this way. And really, he's looking around going, I got a couple more years. Mm-hmm. So let me go somewhere. And that's happened, to your point. That's not a Calgary thing. That's everywhere. Lots of guys leave to chase. Right.
Absolutely.
Leave to
chase whatever.
Right.
Chase. There's guys that leave to chase Stanley Cups. And if that is Michael Backlund's decision after 900 and some games in a Flames uniform, you have to respect it. Lots of guys leave to chase money.
Nothing wrong with it. That's a business.
They're at this point, and there is loyalty to their team and their buddies, but they're independent contractors.
100%.
And they
have been locked out twice in the last 2 decades.
Yeah, and have a chance to further their careers as they see fit. Now, as a team that was talking 9 months ago, less than that, about, hey, we think we can win a cup here. When you, as fans, hear Michael Backlund, your most loyal player, come out at the end of that season and say, and this is not how he said it, but he essentially was saying, I'm not sure we can win a cup here.
Yep.
Well, that's going to elicit a very emotional response. And that's what...
As it should.
As it should. That's what makes...
That's why you have that process.
Absolutely.
And you and I have done enough of it where nothing comes out of it. It's the stock answers that it's kind of shocking in a way when you do get the honesty, right?
Sure. And that's what makes being a fan so great. You should be yelling at your TV when you find out that one of your guys wants to leave or that he doesn't think you can win a cup. You should be invested in what needs to happen next for this organization to get back on track.
It's funny. This all started with the Wranglers. We'll get back to the Wranglers in a second. Were you at all taken aback by what we heard on that final day? And only because, and again, it's too easy to make an observation and say it's always this way. But it wasn't just one or two. There were 3 or 4 really, chewy stories in there.
Yeah, there was a freshness to it this year that you don't often get. And by that, I mean that because they were eliminated right at the very end, there wasn't, sometimes by the time you get to garbage bag day, I always call it locker clean out day. Yeah. Sometimes
you've already done it.
You've kind of healed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You've had a chance to digest it. You've had a chance to, quite frankly, you've answered the questions about it for 4 weeks sometimes. And so,
right.
I don't know if I was surprised, but the emotion was still lingering this year. The emotion was very real on that day. And that got you, I wrote, and I know others kind of assessed it the same way. Like Michael Backlund pausing when he was asked if he'd re-sign was arguably more telling than what he ultimately said.
Agreed.
And he said plenty.
Yep.
We heard a lot of fascinating things. We heard Mackenzie Weegar, the man who built the new event center.
Well, you're not, but you almost got the sense for the history of the Flames, you're not allowed to talk about that stuff. Like we don't talk about. I just remember, I think Mark Giordano talked about the building like once.
Yeah.
Right. Like nobody ever says that stuff.
No. And
they should. Don't get me wrong. They should have.
Yeah. And I think it caught a lot of people by surprise, maybe for that reason.
Right.
But coming and listen, I'm just joking. Mackenzie Weegar is not the reason the deal got done, but a guy who's signed up for 8 years, who's made a commitment, when he makes that kind of comment, certainly, at least in the organization, they felt it.
Yep. Sure they did.
Because it's embarrassing. When one of your players is making fun of your home rink, and there's some irony in the fact that it was Mackenzie Weegar getting toured through the locker room that created a social media storm about how dated the rink is.
Yeah.
But, when one of your guys is taking shots at the rink, it's embarrassing for the organization. The Calgary Wranglers are in the Calgary Flames room now for their playoff run. That's because they don't have a locker room at the Saddle Dome.
That's right.
Like that, it's past due.
And God bless our friend Rick Tulsi, who does an amazing job of showing behind the scenes. And he's tweeting, but look at this. They're in there. They're in an actual NHL dress. I mean, please, Rick, don't do this. Rick, don't do this.
I always get a chuckle when the door opens for the tour and it's like, this is the media lounge.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Media lounge and, whatever else we need it to be.
These are my cracker crumbs here. I'll just see if I can clean those up.
Oh, it's it is what it is.
And I was just having a conversation last night. Like, I do think it's a shame, and let's see what happens with, the politics of this arena are not going away anytime soon. The Saddle Dome has been such a cool part of Calgary's skyline.
Absolutely.
I do think it's a shame that however many years in the future, that's not going to be there. And I was having this conversation last night. I was on my way to a Wranglers practice at Winsport, and I was driving sort of through the new development. I think they call it Trinity Hills at the bottom of Winsport. And I was thinking the same thing earlier this week about the ski jump. Like, this is an iconic part of Calgary's history that I hope...
It's a skyline piece.
Yeah, I hope it's always there. The Saddle Dome is going to be an empty 19,000 seat arena. It can't always be there. I think that's too bad. It's been such a cool piece of Calgary's history, but it's time. It's time for that building to be replaced.
I'm not 100% sure where people are going to go now to take pictures on Scotsman Hill. Like, what are they taking pictures of now? Right? Because how many people go up there to get that picture looking west into downtown? We've all done it. We've all seen it, to the point where I said that I said you guys really should put advertising on it, because since so many photos,
absolutely,
put a sponsor on it, put a big giant QR code for tickets. I don't care, but there's so many photos taken that way, right?
You know, Rob, I pride myself in being able, off the top of my head, to come up with a list of, say, Calgary's 60 most picturesque tee boxes. So send me a note, reach out to me, and I've got some suggestions for you.
Trust me, we are going to get there yet. We are well on our way. Okay, take me back almost, I guess, 11 days now. My first question for you: were you surprised by what happened a week ago, this past Monday? Were you surprised that the team parted ways with the general manager, that the general manager, for all intents and purposes, the general manager parted ways with the team?
Yeah, I guess I was surprised, certainly when that press release landed in my inbox. I wasn't anticipating it. I don't think, based on the season they had, I don't think I can say I was surprised that there would be changes.
Yep.
Of course, there were going to be, and I'm surprised. I wondered, because those of us who have been around the Saddle Dome know Brad's investment level and the way he works, and the fact that there's always a phone to his ear, and the way he wears losses. Like, if you've ever been on the media elevator with Brad Treliving after a loss in mid-December, you'd think they just lost game 7 of a playoff series. And I say that in a complimentary way in a lot of senses. This is a guy who cared so much. And as we debated in the media room whether there'd be a change in that office, what it always came back to for me is, I just wonder if Brad can walk away from it. And I wonder if we knew he was frustrated, and we've heard more and more about the way his relationship with Daryl had headed south. But I still wondered, he built this team. He was proud of the way he built this team. They had a junk season, and I wasn't sure that he could say, it's time for me to do something different. And so that part maybe surprised me. I think if the Calgary Flames announced that they decided not to bring back Brad, and I think he's a hell of a general manager, but if you just based it on results, we've been to the second round twice. We missed the playoffs 4 times during his tenure. We just had we just underachieved.
Disappointing
horribly.
Season. Sure.
Yeah. If you decided to make a change, that wouldn't have shocked me. The fact that it was Brad who said, you know what? No, thanks. That part caught me by surprise a little.
Yeah. I wasn't surprised that there was a parting. I think, when it was all said and done and the dust settled, that, the general manager said, I'm good. I'll go somewhere else. That to me was more damning than the other way. That leads me to, there should be some questions asked here. Really should be some questions asked here. And I mean, I say it all the time, and no disrespect to you or any of your brethren, but because you can't say, as you have to back things up. When Mike Russo reported in The Athletic that the Zucker trade fell apart because they couldn't get a hold of the owner to approve the trade, that's a shining light into how business is done. And I'm not suggesting it's only listen, I wouldn't want to work for Bill Foley in Vegas. What job security is there, right? Like, oh, you didn't win the second round. Goodbye. I would say that Murray Edwards operates in the same way that most NHL owners operate. I'm not suggesting anything other than that. But I also don't think that Brad. I don't think Brad hired Daryl. I don't think that. I think Brad was encouraged to make that decision. I think owners, Murray loves Daryl, and Daryl is, has a reputation and a good one. I mean, he won, right? But I don't think that was the general manager hiring coach. Do you?
Well, I don't think it was the general manager with a gun to his head.
Okay.
Now, what I was thinking of this as you were mentioning, the Jason Zucker deal that fell apart at the deadline a few years ago. One of the things that makes it so tough is that, quite frankly, there's not a lot of people who know what's going on at the Saddle Dome. That's a very
tight ship.
Absolutely. Brad Treliving was telling coworkers on a Wednesday that he wasn't coming back, and we didn't find out until the following Monday.
Yep.
Elliot didn't find out. Frank didn't find out, and nobody found out.
Nope.
They just got a rink deal done.
Yeah.
Nobody was talking about it.
They got a rink in principle.
My apologies. Can we edit that part?
Yeah, sure.
I don't want to get
don't
in
worry
trouble.
about it.
Yeah,
no.
Okay. You got my back
me
there.
Being prickish here because
No, but you're right. My point is, if we're having so much trouble getting sort of behind the scenes information out of the Saddle Dome, it's really hard to tell, well, how involved is Murray? Where did this break down? Is it Murray and Daryl over here and Brad over here? That's sort of...
Well, I go back to Rhett. I think that, and I'm guilty of saying, I'm guilty of making that assumption. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's, there is ownership plays a large role.
Absolutely.
And management. And so, we all know how hard Brad works.
Yeah.
Nobody works harder. Brad's in on everything all the time. And we saw what he did last year. He proverbially pulled the rabbit out of his hat, whatever you want to say. But he still does that, recognizing that he has to go right up the chain all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And at some point, you want to make your own decisions. At some point, having to justify, or are you sure because the last time you did this, it didn't work? That I just think, and Rhett's right. Like, it's not all Daryl. It's not all Murray. It's the building. It's to be quite honest, sometimes I feel like they need to exercise some demons in there. Wasn't there a movie about the Pope's exorcist? I think they got to go in there sometime and just exercise whatever demons are in there.
It's not a bad idea.
I keep saying this, it's not a criticism, it's an observation. They're the safest team in the National Hockey League. What do they do risky, right? They're very safe, but as a result, they've drafted no higher than fourth twice. No higher than fourth. We're not allowed to say the rebuild word. Why? Because we're children? Is that why? Come on, that's not even a John Bean thing. That's a Jay Feaster thing. So for some of the kids to prop it up going, can you believe I've heard this movie before. remember when Feaster got in all that trouble because he went on TSN and said, oh, we're rebuilding, but my job's to make the playoffs.
Right.
That was a controversy. Right? Like, I think they're too safe.
Well, and rebuilding is messy.
Oh,
and
not a guarantee.
Well, and here's the question I always ask. I go back to, I grew up around here.
Yep.
Most of my buddies are Flames fans. Inevitably, if we go out for a beer, part of the conversation is what's happening with the Flames. And so I've heard over and over from buddies, from whoever over the years, they should rebuild. And I always ask one question. Will you buy tickets while they stink? It's a really important question.
It's the most important question.
And oftentimes the answer is, to be honest, probably not.
Right. And
so Murray Edwards, after a crummy season, is an easy target. Murray Edwards puts $80-some million into salary. Plus whatever he's putting into everything else. The rest of those people at the Saddle Dome aren't working for free.
Right.
I understand the frustration with the owner. I understand that people want to know more about his involvement. Yep. And yet, if you own a company that you're at least trying to break even on,
right?
You want butts in the seats, you want playoff dates, you want all that stuff.
I agree.
Rebuilds are messy because this is not a city that is going to show up in droves to support a team in mid-February that stinks.
Nope.
We know that.
We know that.
And so, yeah, it would be, listen, Connor Bedard would be awesome. Every team would love him. I don't care if it's the teams that are still playing.
Yeah.
If it's the teams that are home already, they all want
Sure they do.
Connor Bedard.
Sure.
The process of actually getting Connor Bedard in a market like this is messy.
Well, and let me just say this, and I don't think I have to, but I will anyway. I am not at all looking for a rebuild. I don't think this is the time for a rebuild. I just find it funny that that's that one piece that does point back to ownership. I'm not allowed to say the R word.
Right.
Okay. And you're exactly right. I don't have the $1 billion. I don't write the checks. You write the checks. I will say this. What was the team you covered before this team?
The Stampeders?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always said about them when they were going through the Frederick Fateri thing that you don't really own a team. You hold it in public trust. That you are holding it in public trust for the rest of the city, and that the donkey show that was the Fredericks and Fateri was embarrassing. And to me, the neatest part about that was it really showed us that there was this diehard, galvanized, small group, not small, but group of fans. Those are the ones that you could not have done anything more to this organization to make it a laughingstock, yet they still went.
Yeah.
That they still went. They scared away all the casual observers. They scared away all the nobody went except the diehards, right? And that's when you hold the team in public trust.
Yeah.
You cut the checks, absolutely 100%, but you do hold the team in public trust.
And all that's changed since that era.
Yeah.
What was that? Early 2000s?
That was 2002, 2003, 2004 in that range. Yeah.
All that's changed since that era is watching sports on your couch is that much better.
Oh, absolutely.
And
easier.
So absolutely. And better quality.
Yeah.
And you can get lettuce at the grocery store for the same that you'd buy nachos at the Saddle Dome now. So you can have a very healthy snack while you're at it.
How long have you been sitting on that? How long have you been workshopping that?
So supporting a rebuild is different.
I agree.
You might be the first one to go buy a Connor Bedard jersey.
Yeah.
But what happens when you pick 5th? And then, it's a process.
Or when you pick Sam Bennett at 4.
Yeah.
And I'm not crapping all over the pick.
No, it was a bad draft.
But it's the highest, they've only done that twice, right? And then
just once.
No,
before
that. That's what I mean. They've done it twice. No, I thought they did. I thought they drafted 4th twice. Wasn't Corey Stillman a 4th pick?
Overall? No, maybe in the Atlanta days, but 6th was the highest.
6th was the highest. 4th was the highest they ever picked. Okay. Yeah. Because I've been saying that wrong for 2 weeks. So thank you for correcting.
And maybe I'm wrong on this, but one of their 6th picks, I think, was Daniel Tkachuk.
Yes, it was.
So
yeah.
Rebuild.
Very well. And I don't disagree with that, Wes. But on the same token, I don't think you should run around saying I'm not allowed to say the R word.
No, I agree with you there. Yeah. But I think you need to get, for a rebuild to make sense, you need to get organically bad. And
well, you know what? You know where this could have happened? This could have happened in 14-15. But the find of way freaking Flames ruined it.
Yeah. And listen, maybe it can happen in a couple of years. If all these guys after this season are, if the rumblings that we're hearing that a bunch of guys already want out, maybe you organically are going to start to get to where it would make sense to rebuild. But right now with all these veterans,
it was an underperforming team.
Well, and you've just committed $150 million or something in that range to a couple of forwards that you've sort of committed to at least trying to win with for a while, right?
Yeah.
And so
I don't think they're as bad off as everybody makes them. I think next year could be, but I would come back to you, and I fully understand what I'm about to say. I know there's more, but tell me from your vantage point, having worked the whole season, now looking back, how fractured was the relationship in the room, do you think, between the coach and the players, or was that kind of oversold?
Well, I think with that sort of coach, and when I say that sort of coach, I mean a guy who
hard ass old school.
Yeah, who's sort of stepping on your what all the time.
Yep.
If you're not winning, it's tough.
Yep.
Always. With that kind of coach, and you would have said the same even, Bob Hartley was a
Yes, he was
a guy who
Sure he was.
did not coach with a velvet glove. And so when you have a coach like that and you're not having success, there's trouble there.
Yeah.
I wonder, and I don't know the answer to this, but it's not like Daryl doesn't have supporters in the Flames locker room. And
Well,
so
your top player this year said he'd come back and sign to play for him.
right. And so I wonder potentially if there was a split between the guys who were bought in and the guys who weren't necessarily bought in. It was weird. We all saw the tweet from Jonathan Huberdeau's agent. There's no joy at the Saddle Dome. The next day, all we heard was, "Oh, we love each other in here." And
Kind of an overcorrection.
as Peter Labardius always puts it, you kind of hear that when there's problems.
Mm-hmm.
Teams that are really tight don't need to tell you all the time how tight they are.
Nope.
And so now that was just one day of the season, but this idea, and I know it's not what you're saying, but there's this idea floating around that you take Daryl and you extricate him and everything's going to be fine.
Right.
It's oversimplified.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
No, I think Rhett Warner shares that. I think it's good for headlines. It's good for social media.
You got to blame someone.
Somebody needs to take the fall, right? And there's a schism in the dressing room and things like that, but it's not that simple, right? To your point, you are not the first person, and I don't mean that negatively. All I mean is that I'm actually kind of glad to hear it from you, because now I think that's where I would start paying more attention. That the real split was within the players, not between the players and the coach. You know what I'm saying? Like, we always thought it was the players and the coach. I guess we need to look a little closer at how close that team was as a group.
Yeah, and I can't stress enough that I don't know for sure.
How would we?
What was going on in that room, but it's not like nobody was supporting the coach.
And say what you will about Alan Walsh, who is Huberdeau's agent. He has a history of doing this, and he's doing it on behalf, like everybody says. Everybody's if he does that on his own, he's out. Huberdeau would get rid of him. But he did it for Derek Brassard when he was in Columbus. He did it for was it Halak? Which goalie? Yeah, he did it for Halak.
He did it for Marc-Andre.
He did it for Marc-Andre Fleury.
He did it for Michael Frolik.
That's right. He did it for Frolik. So there's two examples. To me, I don't have to like it, but it does make me pay attention, because I think he's doing the bidding of the player.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, and I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation between Jonathan and his agent, but Jonathan then can come out the next day and say, well, guys, that was my agent.
Bad agent.
You'd have to ask him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's
still his agent, right?
It's a play, like that's in the playbook.
It's in the playbook.
Jonathan, tell them they'll have to ask me. Don't worry about it. I've done this.
I've got your back, buddy.
Now, listen, I'm sure that for Jonathan Huberdeau, there were a lot of, oh my God, what is going on here moments. This is a guy who is really hard on himself, who had a rotten season offensively at the worst time, because not only was he trying to follow up on the best season of his career, but he was also trying to justify the largest contract in franchise history.
Yep.
And I stood in front of Jonathan Huberdeau over and over and over. I joked, if that's the right way to put it, throughout the season. You couldn't ask Jonathan Huberdeau you couldn't ask him what the weather was like without him telling you he'd like to have more points. He went out of his way to be accountable.
And I call that the Tony Amonte rule. Because when Tony Amonte was here, we would go and ask him, Tony, you're doing a great job killing penalties. What's the success of the penalty kill? I've got to find a way to create more offense.
That's exactly what we heard from Jonathan.
And to me, that's an athlete, and that's front of mind for that athlete. That is absolutely, when they are going there on their own without being prodded, that's front of mind. And if he's constantly doing that, then he's obsessing. That's a a technical term we doctors of psychology use. But you know what I mean?
I might. Do you mind if I use that
yeah,
sometime?
feel free.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That's a freebie. Take it.
Yeah, and so there was a lot more that went into that than just getting comfortable in Calgary, just understanding how to play under the coach, all of that.
Yeah.
But, you know, if we sat here, if you and I were sitting here in September, say August, because the contract wasn't done yet.
Yeah.
And you said, give me the worst case scenario for Jonathan Huberdeau's first season in Calgary. We were not very far off.
Outside of a major injury, catastrophic injury at the beginning of the year, if you told me he was going to play most of the season, if not the entire season, this is it.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah. And it went poorly from...
But I also believe, we were talking about legacy before for Tree.
Yeah.
I also believe in many ways, Brad Treliving believed he had to do that. He had to give him that deal. He had to show, he had to. And again, easy for me to say, and I sound like a Brad apologist, but this town was so fragile, right? It just gotten beaten by its own worst enemy in the second round after it won game 1 and looked like it was going to win game 2.
Right.
And that whole hangover came right to the end of the calendar hockey year, the end of June, and it could not have got any worse. And for 3 days there, it was Death Valley.
Yeah.
Who was buying tickets? Who was going to come and watch this?
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like he had no choice in his own mind. Not only did he have to get that, he had to get that guy locked in too.
If you went the opposite way and Jonathan Huberdeau's unsigned into January, there is a 5-alarm fire every day on he's going to leave.
100%.
No market.
100%.
Even Toronto does not do the guess who wants to play here like Montreal does.
Yep.
If there is a Quebec-raised star player, we're seeing it with Pierre-Luc Dubois.
I was just about to say,
right?
They'd be playing together, wouldn't they?
That was it. It's all you would hear. He must want to go to Montreal. He must want to go to Montreal. He must want to go to Montreal.
Yeah.
And so, and on Jonathan's side of the fence, hey, I just had 115 points. Of course I'll talk long-term extension. Everyone says, well, they got to re-sign Tyler Foley. Well, yeah, absolutely. They should.
Coming off his best season?
He just had his best season. It's a really hard time to sign a guy to a good contract.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Of course Nazem Kadri wanted to sign for 7 years. He just had his best season.
Yeah. Yep.
So those are tough contracts to sign and really tough contracts to win. And I guarantee when Brad Treliving, and when I say guarantee, I certainly haven't heard this from Brad or anyone, but I'm sure he knew it wasn't going to look great after a while. 10.5 is a lot of money for anybody.
Yeah, but he didn't think he'd see the end of it.
Well, and he didn't think it would look like way too much money at this point.
If I was to fill you full of pendiums, what's the movie drug that we give you to tell the truth? Pentothal, right?
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm old. I can't remember. But
is that what I was supposed to grab on the way in?
I think so.
Today?
If I filled you full of truth serum and I asked you what kind of season is he going to have next year? Because I think he has a bounce back season.
I think so. I
don't think he gets 116.
No,
but I expect 80.
I was just going to say I'd put him at around a point per game.
Yep, that's where I think he goes.
I kind of want to know what sort of news comes in the next month, though.
I think all of that is an influence.
You got to find him a line mate.
Yes, you do.
And I'm not even saying you have to go find him a line mate in free agency or in a trade. You just you got to make something work here. That him and Nazem Kadri had the chemistry of I don't even know what.
Sodium pentothal. That's what I had to fill you.
Coffee and mayonnaise. Did you see that about the NFL draft?
No.
Well, this poor kid who sat through the first round last night didn't get picked. There's a clip of him saying, well, sometimes I put mayonnaise in my coffee, which is disgusting. Anyway, I was thinking of something that has no chemistry. And so I came, as you know, I'm very topical.
I understand that.
Yeah. So,
listen, I do want to get to one of your passions. So let me just limit it to a couple more hockey questions. One, and you mentioned it, guys that could play on his line. The listeners and the viewers of this podcast know they're going to repeat the words right out of my mouth because I've said it since I started doing this in February. I really don't have any personal bias against Daryl. I like Daryl. I really do. And he's treated me really well. My critique of Daryl this year was I was really disappointed in the fact that Matthew Phillips did not get a legitimate opportunity here. When you look at how many overtime games this team played, how many 1-goal games, he played 2 games. I thought he was noticeable in both. He contributed in both, but that was it. That's all. And I also know that part of that is Daryl believes that a player should, come to the NHL ready. He shouldn't be developing players. And I think he felt like he had to develop that player. I'm really disappointed that Matthew Phillips didn't get a legitimate shot. I don't think he got a legitimate shot here.
There's no way that you could say he got a legitimate shot. And I was on 2 road trips that Matthew Phillips was on. So we all thought he was going to debut in Columbus, and then they had this weird thing going on with someone on waivers, and so Horna gets called up. He debuted anyway. So then he plays in Toronto and plays in Montreal.
Yep.
Hit the post in Montreal, I think.
Was on the ice for a power play goal in Toronto, I believe.
Yeah, played on the second unit both nights. And so plays those 2 games, comes home, he's scratched for a couple, and then the Flames went on a 4-game road trip, 2 in San Jose, and then the 2 SoCal spots, and he was healthy. So I saw Matthew Phillips a lot in the press box. You don't talk to a healthy scratch middle of the game, but I was sitting where Matthew Phillips was sitting. And you could not, nobody at the Saddle Dome could look you in the eye and say, we gave him a shot. And if there was ever a downside, and maybe that's not the right way to put it, if there was ever a downside to having your AHL team in your own backyard, it would be that Daryl had made up his mind on Matthew Phillips from what he'd already watched. He'd decided, despite all the goals he'd seen, despite the impact he'd seen Matthew Phillips have on the power play, despite the fact that Daryl's son Brett raves about Matthew Phillips as a person and what kind of is part of the leadership group for the Wranglers, despite all that, Daryl's mind was made up on Matthew Phillips.
Yep.
And so, and maybe that was the first official glimpse of the power struggle we got is Brad finally said, I'm bringing him up. And Daryl said, fine.
He's sitting, but you can bring him up. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now, because he didn't play enough NHL games over a certain span, he becomes an unrestricted free agent this summer. Matthew Phillips, despite growing up in Calgary, despite loving Calgary, Matthew Phillips should be, and I'm sure will be, looking for an opportunity somewhere else. He will be, maybe he won't receive as much interest. The Flames won't be the only organization that has people in it that don't think that Matthew Phillips can do it.
I agree.
I spent a lot of time asking scouts about Matthew Phillips because I was curious.
Yeah.
And the knock or the question is, at his size, is he explosive enough? When you're really small, you also need to be like a plus skater, and they're not sure Matthew Phillips is that.
Yeah.
All that said, I think back to Austin Czarnik.
Mm-hmm.
Here was a guy who put up huge numbers in the AHL, had never really gotten an opportunity in the NHL. When he signed in Calgary, I think we heard that 20-some teams had expressed interest in him.
Yep.
I don't know if it's going to be 20-something, but there'll be a team. And probably if you're Matthew Phillips, you should be looking at the teams that are in the lottery.
Yep.
That'll say, we need some talent. We're going to give this guy a look. And if he pops, or even if he just becomes a regular, he's not going to be the same player as Paul Byron, but if he
became Paul Byron,
a guy who plays 75 to 80 games a night or a season, for whatever city he ends up in, people are always going to look back and say, we never give this kid a true chance, and they'll be right.
And I think it stings too, because of exactly what you said a couple of times. He's a local guy. And there, there's a value to that. There just is. And I understand it's a game and we got to make decisions. No, it's not. It's a business. Don't ever fool yourself. That's why there were lockouts. It's a business. And you're right, dude. They've got to sell tickets. And he could have sold them a few tickets. Like, I get it. I understand it. I just think it was a miss.
And
I just think it was a miss.
And if the kid isn't going to play at the NHL level, let him decide it.
Yeah.
Let's see it.
Yeah.
Let's play him for 6 or 7 in a row. If you, I just listed all those cities I watched, watched games that he was also watching it. If he played those 9 in a row when he was called up, or he played 8 of 9, and then you looked at it and said, and don't get me wrong, I'm not sure 8 or 9 games is a legit look.
No, but
at least you've given him some runway.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a guy who scored 15 game-winning goals in the American Hockey League this season.
Yep.
If you had a guy who had scored 15 game-winning goals, was on the prospect side of the age spectrum, and by that I just mean we're not talking about a 33-year-old who's been in the AHL forever. We're not talking about Alan Quine.
No.
How's that for a reference?
Buddy Robinson.
Yeah.
Right?
The real
no, Alan Quine. Yeah, no, Quine. But Quine had he played playoff games for the Islanders.
Right. But that was a guy who at 30 or whatever was putting up big numbers in the A, but his time had passed.
Yep.
And so we're not talking about that with Matthew Phillips. We're talking about a guy who should be just coming into his best years.
Right.
Are his best years going to be good enough that he can be an NHLer? We won't find out in this city.
No. Last one, and then I want to ask you about some golf things. You put out a tweet, and this isn't about the decision. We've already talked about the decision. This is about the human being. You put out a tweet about Brad that I thought, and I retweeted it because I thought it was really him.
Yeah.
Like that's, it's a business to be hired and fired. He'll be okay. He's happy, wealthy. He'll get another job, but he's a good human being. You put it out. I think Will put one out, or Will not put out.
Yeah.
He's a little bit of a different guy in our world, isn't he?
Yeah. And so for those who haven't seen it, I can share, I still have on my phone, a text saved from Brad, a long enough text that you have to scroll all the way up and down your iPhone twice to read it.
Yeah.
And he sent me that on the day 5 and change years ago that my dad passed away.
Right.
We're talking, October, right before the season started. And as it turns out, Brad had lost his mom. I believe it was the previous year. I could be wrong on the exact timeline, but we're talking about probably a 150-word text message saying, I know what it's like, not just, hey, my condolences, Brad.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like. If you ever want to talk, please call me. Just I read it again that day and was sort of back on the brink of the emotions that it brought on that day. But but it tells you, and Will Null has a similar story. Like, this is a really good dude.
Yeah,
this is a really good dude who was a really good ambassador for the city of Calgary and for the Flames organization for the past 9 seasons.
Yep. And
this is a dude who's going to be a really good hire for another NHL team, I think, sooner than later.
I agree. And my version of that is, I would go to him and go, hey, Brad, we want to do a coaching. Yep. That was him. He didn't let me finish. He just, anything I ever asked him if he'd help in the community, he was there. Now, you got to win. I get that. That's not what this is. I just wanted to make sure that we were, because I loved it.
It's important to highlight because
they're human beings.
It's easy to move the pieces around.
Yeah,
right?
And I can share stories about Daryl in the same vein too. Right?
Absolutely, and so can I.
Yeah, exactly. So we sometimes it's hard because it feels like you're picking a side. It's not a matter of picking. It's the whole thing's weird.
Well, and it's part of the privilege of the job. We do get to know them a little bit.
Sure.
We can probably share. That doesn't happen as often with the players, but a guy gets traded or a guy gets signs elsewhere. There's stories like that. Not necessarily the same, but like these these are people.
Some really good dudes.
Yeah.
There's some really good dudes.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a little bit about golf.
Feels like golf weather out there.
It feels like golf weather. We're about to have some really cool things happen in this city when it comes to golf, aren't we?
Absolutely. Yeah. The next, let's say the next summer and a half. But
Okay.
if you just want to recap the sort of local golf news in the last couple of months. So the LPGA Tour or Golf Canada announces that the Canadian Women's Open is going to be played at Earl Grey next summer, just down the road.
Yep.
For those who don't know where Earl Grey Golf Club is, it's overlooking the Glenmore Reservoir essentially at the end of Crowchild Trail.
Yep.
And so if there was ever, the LPGA has been to Prentice Greens a couple of times and you'd hear, wow, it was too far to go. The shuttle ride was too long for fans. Like, this is going to be as accessible of a tournament as you could imagine.
Right.
And so Brooke Henderson,
I was just going to say,
like the things she is doing on the LPGA Tour and the impact she's having on golf everywhere, not just in Canada, is remarkable. Brooke and all her friends will be at Earl Grey next summer. So that's number one.
Yep.
You've got the Canadian Women's Open. You've got, just tucked into all the news about what's going on with the telecom giants, the Shaw Charity Classic is going to be extended. I think the commitment was another 10 years.
So I'm going to stop you right there. Tell us a little bit, for those who don't know, don't follow golf. Tell us exactly how important but impressive this tournament has become and how quickly it has become that.
Well, especially it's a PGA Tour Champions event, which is essentially
the old senior
tour. The senior tour. It's 50 and over. And they are raising charity dollars with this event that tour had never heard of. They broke they initially set the record for the largest, single season, let's call it, charitable give in Champions Tour history, PGA Tour Champions history. And then every year they just break it.
Yep.
Our buddy Chris Dornan has the template, public relations ace, communications ace. He's got the template, I'm sure, on his computer. New record. Here's the new number.
Here it is. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Ho hum. Here's another one. Yeah. And so, the significance of then the title sponsor wanting to stick around after the merger with Shaw, that long-term commitment is great news for golf fans, but it's also, in a community where we're talking about like millions and millions every year. I forget what it was this past season, like 17 million or something they raised.
Yeah, it's a boon for charities in this city.
200 children's-based charities. Like you couldn't hit a pitching wedge without, running into a charity that's been impacted, and so that part of it is absolutely huge. And it's going to be back at Canyon Meadows this year. And then the sort of third bit is that the PGA Tour Canada, which is a developmental tour that it was a starting point for Corey Connors and you name it, all these guys who are playing on the PGA Tour, they're having their season-ending championship at Country Hills this year. And so that's an event that's never been in Calgary before. That's an event that the guy who wins is automatically going to play in a PGA Tour event the next week.
Right.
Like, this is a stepping stone circuit, but we're not talking about having to wait for the step very long.
Yeah.
And so the person who finishes atop the money list on that event is automatically exempt on the Corn Ferry Tour, the next level, the next season. And so see you later.
Yep.
Just, that's all getting sealed in Calgary this year. And so in what has always been a very golf mad market, like, there's a lot to look forward to here.
I'm excited about it. What about you? Do you have any, are you checking any off the bucket list this year?
TBD. Nothing booked, but the bucket list will need some new ink on it. And so I'll have to figure something out here.
Outstanding. Wes, I appreciate this, sir. This was a fun conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I always appreciate your point of view. And like I say, you can get no bigger endorsement than you are my mom's favorite reporter. So hopefully we'll get you on again. I hope they spread the information out for you. They don't have to, lump it all in at a draft or something.
I'm going to jump in my car and phone my mom and just make sure I'm her favorite reporter too.
I haven't heard any different, but you probably should get that confirmation. Thanks, Wes.
Thank you.
Wes Gilbertson from Post Media. Our guest brought to you by Ski Sellers Snowboard, skisellersnowboard.com. Not just skis and snowboards. No. They can keep you warm. And, well, it's really warm today, but it's going to be cool in the fall. Still a little spring skiing. There's reasons to go to skisellersnowboard.com. We are live in the Oodle Noodle studio. Local, love delicious. Since opening their first store back in 2005, Oodle Noodle has been all flavor and just the right amount of weird. Coming up in just a second, we will bring in our good friend, our dear friend, and actually the guest who's been on this program the most so far. David Legg will join us in a second. Next week, speaking of Will Nault, we just mentioned Will Nault. Will's going to join us on Monday along with Ryan Pike. Peter Marr and Eric DeHatchuk are in with us. You may as well get set up because we will roll right into our next guest as we are going to talk a little bit more in depth about the last couple of days. Now that the event center has been launched, now that we're starting to see I don't know how to describe it. I guess everybody's kind of picking a lane. We thought we'd get into that conversation. Of course, guest brought to you by Ski Seller Snowboard, skisellersnowboard.com. He is the man, the myth, the legend from Mount Royal University, one half of the We've Solved Nothing podcast. Mr. Sport and Recreation himself, David Legg, joins us. Hello.
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 How are you?
I'm really good. It is not easy finding a place to park around here.
Well, I could tell you. Yes, because of the construction, which wasn't there yesterday, right? Like this is kind of the game we play. We come and when it was melting, there was a big giant lake over there, so there's no parking over there. Having said that, you've been to other studios. This is a nice little neighborhood.
This is awesome,
right?
Love it.
Yeah,
love it.
You and I were together on Tuesday when word came down that there was an announcement coming, and did you end up going or did you?
I watched it online. I watched Wes's, didn't Wes ask the last question to John Bean, and John, I don't want to say kind of said, hey, I think that question's already been answered. I think it was Wes that asked that question. Anyways, yes, I watched it online.
You and I have had many conversations about what Calgary needs, about what other centers do, about, what it can bring, what it could cost. There's so many places to start, but now that you've had a couple of days to ruminate, what do you make of, we got to be careful how we word this because it's not a deal. It's a deal in principle. And I think that's very significant.
Yeah. Part of the difficulty is, and I think this has been part of the consternation and part of the backstory in the last couple of days, is that people didn't know the full potential deal.
Yeah.
And I think even this morning there were still some
pieces coming out,
clarification on who is getting what.
Yeah.
And we live in a day and age where everybody wants full access,
full transparency
to all information.
Yeah.
But that I don't know if that's reasonable. I don't know if that's appropriate when you're having negotiations, but if it's using taxpayer dollars, then do taxpayers have the right to know everything that's taking place in that negotiation? And that's an interesting question in and of itself that's playing out in this one specific to a sporting and event center facility. So going back to our podcast, I'm not sure we're going to solve anything with this conversation about the event center because there's still so much that is yet to play out as it relates to a provincial election, as it relates to the finite details, as it relates to public engagement. I do what I thought was interesting, perhaps the most interesting piece in all of this was that Calgary City Council was unanimous in their support of it. I don't follow city council decisions intimately, but
that doesn't happen often. Right?
I hearken. Maybe intimately wasn't the right word. Hearken to guess that there have been many decisions that have been unanimously supported. And this one was.
Yeah.
And so to me, I guess I am a believer in the democratic process. We elect our city council members to make decisions on our behest, and we don't every single question and every single issue doesn't have to come back to the individual to make a decision. Perhaps in the future, maybe that's what we do because of the ability we have online to make those sort of decisions.
Right.
But at the moment, we elect an individual, we give them the power and the responsibility to make decisions on our behalf. And then every 4 years, we're allowed to then have our input on that decision-making process. And in this particular instance, everybody said yes to the deal.
We had our old buddy Bruce Dobingen on Wednesday, and Bruce, he's a little bit from the Andrew Zimbalist crowd that, not necessarily a big believer in sports buildings have the economic impact. And certainly, and I have a ton of respect for Andrew Zimbalist because he's done it for years.
Yeah.
And he was kind of the first guy to go against the grain and say, hold on here. This might not be exactly what everybody makes it out to be. Having said that, and Bruce raised a really interesting point, was that the plan itself, the entirety of the plan, the building of the hotels and everything up there was really going to impact the community in such a positive way that, and he spoke it. That's not a fun place to be after dark. And certainly, I wouldn't want my daughter down there after dark. Now there's a yin and a yang to that, because usually what you end up doing is pushing problems somewhere else. But as a development, I was very impressed. Like, I'm very impressed with the vision of that development and where it fits.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it looks, it looks fantastic in a hypothetical,
in a
theoretical way. There have been other venues, other cities that have attempted similar types of developments. Well, I mean, Glendale and Phoenix, could perhaps be an example of that.
No, it's an example of that.
That didn't take.
I think Canada, having just been to Canada, there's building around it. There's more building around it than the first time I went to Canada, but it didn't do what it was supposed to do.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side, there are other examples where it has. And
Staples, Columbus,
Detroit.
Yeah.
And so, some of these, kind of quote unquote rust
belt and Edmonton.
Yeah.
I would say Edmonton's working.
Well, and it's still even in the early stages of that, right? I mean, perhaps in the gentrification or
is that the right term for this?
I'm not sure. I mean, where the new event center is being planned and where the Saddle Dome is located, but I think they've been waiting. So I think that area has been in a kind of a pause for the last perhaps a decade or so, waiting for something like this to take hold so that they could have the argument, they could have a bit more, not a guarantee, but just that sense of, yes, this is going to take place. And so, and because people are probably hesitant to put money down, to invest, to, nobody wants to be that first one to build because they don't want to take that risk. But, and I shouldn't say nobody, but few people. Now that the event center or the arena or whatever it's going to be called in the future, and again, like we started off right away, it's still not a done deal. But once it is, if it is, then I think you'll see the developers coming to the table to get in line, ready to move forward, whether it's hotels, restaurants, apartments, condominiums. I mean, like, I think the one aspect of this that I'm really, really supportive of is I think our downtown is struggling right now. And in particular, as we're still coming out of the pandemic. Yeah. And so I think having that anchor downtown, allowing people to want to come downtown, to live downtown, to play downtown, I think is a really good thing for our city.
Don't disagree. And I would say to you that some of the things that the city has done with an eye to that overall plan, the platform, the library, the music center.
Yeah.
They will all benefit immensely by having that area built up, right? They will become feature parts of that area.
Exactly.
Right. So from that standpoint, makes a ton of sense to me. So now let me give you the list of grievances. And this goes back, I'm sure I asked you the same thing when we talked about Calgary Next. Show me something. Give me a picture. Show me what the inside of it's going to look like. Tell me. Like, it's hard. And this goes back to I want dreamers. Like, give me something to glom onto. Now, we have overhead views and we know where it's going to go. And they, in theory, have told us, But aren't we missing that? Like, isn't that a missing piece here? Like, show us something.
Well,
Or is that overrated?
I think it's a cart before the horse, though.
Is it?
In that, well, I think what people are afraid of doing now, and so we've created this issue.
You and me?
ourselves. Not you and I
Okay.
particularly, but we, the royal we.
The royal we.
In that if something was put out, there would be a long line of naysayers and
Oh, you mean like
this isn't-
jerseys? Like never release a jersey ahead because then
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I actually I'm
Okay.
I'm okay with this approach in part because first of all, it's a little bit of the mystery still, and what's it actually going to look like, and surprise me, and I can't wait to kind of be, impressed with how it is presented and what it's going to look like, and how it's, how cool it's going to be, and to kind of throw everything out there for public consumption. I don't think I would have done that
Okay.
way either.
Okay.
However, the difficulty is that people want to know that because they want to know, quote unquote, what they're buying. And so everybody feels that they are part of this purchase themselves as taxpayers.
Yep.
And so I don't want to buy something if I don't know what it is. And
Right.
so there's that push pull, and there's that I realize that's a bit of a paradox, and I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth.
No, I don't think you are, because it's just an opinion I have, and it's an opinion I've had. It goes all the way back to, and it's about something we're going to talk about here in a second. When Calgary Next was announced, Ken King and I did 3 or 4 call-in shows where fans were invited to call in and ask about the building. And I think the intent then from Ken and CSEC was, let's talk about, how we pay for this. Let's talk. Nobody did that. They called in and they want to know how many washrooms are going to be.
Yeah.
They wanted,
Yeah.
if you remember, Calgary Next actually had some photos, and maybe that's why they're not doing it. But Ken had to say, like, people were calling and going, I don't want to watch a football game like that. And Ken's like, no, don't worry about that.
This is concept.
This is concept.
Yeah.
And, I just remember from that point, nobody was really arguing about the price tag. Nobody was really arguing about who should pay. They wanted details.
Well, and it comes back to what's in it for me? How does this impact me?
Yes.
And so, automatically, I think people went to, how much am I going to have to pay for tickets? Does this mean my season ticket price is going to go up? Does this mean my individual, am I going to be able to afford going to a hockey game? And then there were, of course, the people who don't like even going to the hockey games. And they're like, why am I participating in this? This is something that I don't like to do. I
You
don't
want to
like,
see Taylor Swift?
I don't like Lady Gaga. So I don't,
I don't like Lady Gaga.
I don't
Okay.
care if Lady
Okay.
Gaga comes to Calgary and Edmonton. And so, but the difficulty is again, that's the myopic, how does this impact me? And I want the city, I want our leaders to not think that way. I want our leaders to think
I want them to be
more
dreamers.
globally. I want them to be dreamers. I want them to
I agree.
be get done stuffers.
No, you're right here. That's the hymn book. That's hymn number 1. Let's get stuff done. And I know this is not the right analogy, but through COVID, we learned about, to me, it became such a leadership lesson. There's managers and there's leaders. Leaders don't tell you what you want to hear.
Mhm.
Leaders tell you what you need to hear. And, somebody's got to stand up and say, we don't do something around here. We're losing. And you know who's doing it? David Finch, our pal. If you don't do something, you're going to lose kids.
Yeah.
They're going to go somewhere else, right? Because they want these services. Now, I say this all the time, and you can correct me, and you've heard me say this before. I have never driven under the underpass at the airport.
I think you really should, because you've used that line with me several times. I think just for your own.
Well, but then I can't use it anymore. I drove there once. I have never driven under it, but we needed it.
Yeah.
We needed it. So we get it.
No, and this is one of the benefits of living in a large urban center.
Yes.
That is as progressive and as forward thinking and entrepreneurial as Calgary, which is why we're ranked the 3rd most livable city in the world, or whatever it is we are. 5th.
With the Saddle Dome.
Yeah. But it's because of people that have come before us.
Yes.
Who have recognized that we need a Arts Commons. We need a National Music Center. We need a fantastic downtown public library. We need community art. I mean, as much as people might still hate the
No,
big blue line,
you know what? I've come 180 degrees on that. It's part of what the city.
Yeah.
Again, I can't be all about me. It has to be about us.
we have to have great parkways. We have to have great pathways. We have to have, I could just go on and on and on and on. And those things are not going to please all people all the time. But it's it's the collection of all those things
Yes.
that allows the diversity and, perhaps a changing pattern of usage. And maybe at a certain point in time, you will become, somebody that wants to go see Lady Gaga. And maybe at some point in time, you will want to go and watch, the Calgary Wranglers playoff run or something along that line. And it just because it may not impact you right now at this exact moment in time of your life. And that's the other part that frustrates me is people who have benefited from that approach and are now like, wow, I'm not using it anymore. I'm not going to do that anymore. So why would I want to support that?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
We have to think beyond our own self-absorbed perspective. And we have to think of the royal we, the
general good. Yeah. Okay. Let me continue with my list of grievances. No, I shouldn't say that. So 2 things. One, I'll go chronologically.
Okay.
I thought for what it was, I thought it was way too big a ceremony. And I don't know why that's bothering me. And maybe it's because I really, really like Lanny and Jamie, but I don't think that's the time you bring those guys out. I thought there was way too much pomp and circumstance for principle. In principle, I think when you have the deal, you bring out Lanny, put a hard hat on him, and he breaks the dirt. I just thought that, you looked at it and you said, oh, well, this is going to, and God love her. And I don't want to get political, but it was the first time that I felt like Danielle Smith was being honest with me when she utters the line, that's why on May 29th, I'm hoping Calgarians give our UCP government a clear mandate to proceed with this deal. Like, that's not when you bring out Lanny. That's not when am I wrong on that? Or was that, did you not feel it at the end of the day that was a little bit too much?
Well,
and it's a small thing. It's a small thing, but I just wonder, is this where we've got to the city and CSEC and everybody's so desperate to get a deal done that they're really hanging this hat on? And this is buying votes, right?
Yeah. Now everybody may not have been on the same page insofar as the script went.
Yeah.
And so that may not have been discussed earlier. And
gotcha. Yeah, fair enough.
So that piece of it may not have been part of the conversation that was had earlier. I don't know. But I like ceremony.
Okay.
My favorite part of the Flames games is kind of the 10 minutes before the puck drop where, the lights are flashing and people are getting like, just it's that I don't know, the pent up, like it's the anticipation of it and the singing of the national anthem, everybody going, see, like I love that part.
Sure.
And so I got to be honest with you. I actually really, I watched it online
and you liked it. You thought it was right.
Well, I did. I thought it was exciting. It was like, we've got the mayor, we've got the premier, we've got city council members there. We've got former players, we've got current players, we've got, the youth that are there. We've got, like, it just seemed to me that this was this kind of the celebratory sense of we got stuff done. And it's taken a while and it maybe, like it's the proverbial sausage. I mean, maybe you don't want to know kind of actually how it ended up getting made. But it got done and it's maybe not perfect.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it's easy to criticize it compared to what the price tag was 3 years ago or 4 years ago.
But it's not the same project either.
It's a totally different, well, it's not a totally different project, but it's certainly a significant enough.
It's far more than what it was going to be.
Project.
Right? Yeah.
And I mean, has anybody gone grocery shopping in the last little bit? I mean, prices are different.
No, I agree. Absolutely. And the COVID did that, right? The cost of construction went straight up. And I'm fine. Like, I do not need to be right about everything. I really don't. But that one thing was, I just wondered if this was the right time because it bothers me. I want an arena, but I'm not going to vote for a political party to get an arena. Well, I don't want to get into the UCP or whatever. That's not what it could have been. The NDP did this, and I still feel the same way. And I'm quite honest, I don't think the NDP are helping the situation either because, we haven't seen the deal. The deal's right there. You can look at the deal.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it's politics, right?
The timing, yeah, and it's, it is unfortunate that
but not unprecedented.
No.
Right.
It's unfortunate though that it has become a political issue,
right?
Because it's been something that we've been talking about for 10 years.
I sent you the 8-part series on building an arena from 2011.
Okay, so more than 10 years ago, we've been talking about this. And so for it to suddenly kind of, really, come to the forefront, a few days before,
Yeah.
the writ is going to be dropped on Monday, I presume. So for it to have happened just the week prior, the timing is, I would say, almost unfortunate, because this is a conversation. This is an issue that is important to the city.
It is. But I felt like she made it. You know what I mean?
And listen, she's the premier has been criticized for this by other people already. So this is not, it's not just you and
No.
talking out of turn.
Listen, I'm not criticizing her. God bless her. She said something honest, right?
Well,
she wasn't beating around the bush. She was. I'd much rather have that than. Oh, you mean there's an election on Monday? Oh, I didn't know. And we've seen that movie before too, right?
Yeah. No. Well, and so again, it comes back to the conversation we had earlier, but we get sometimes what we ask for, and I agree. I would prefer to have our politicians speak more freely and openly, and at least me feel that they're being honest with me and I know what I'm getting, as opposed
I don't have to like it,
as opposed to the I'm constantly unsure and I'm skeptical. But that's a whole other conversation.
I agreed, and this is that part of it is not CSEC or the city or anything like that. That's just my observation about that. This one is a little bit on CSEC or somebody. There's no champion right now. Have you noticed that? Who's the champion for this? And I made mention of Calgary Next. Ken went, and Ken was great for that. He did everything and everybody, and he was everywhere, and he took questions. And if you had a show, if you had a podcast with 9 listeners, he wanted to be on there to talk to those 9 listeners. Who's the champion here right now?
Well, I thought, again, just based on the press conference, I actually thought John Bean presented well. I thought he was the champion.
Oh, I meant kind of I should have said this better. Post announcement.
Oh, I see.
Who's been out there? Some guy's got a news guy's got a podcast. I'd like somebody to come on my podcast and tell me why this is a good idea and everything. I don't know who he is, but I don't see anybody doing that.
Yeah. Well, again, I think the difficulty is the timing of the previous announcement, and now it has become very politicized.
Yes.
And so
yes,
I think, and again, we have created this system now where people are anxious to be outspoken and to go into public discourse and to have public conversations, because things are going to be so roundly criticized and hacked. And so I suspect there was the recognition that, this, and maybe I'm not giving credit where credit is due, but I think there was recognition that it became very political very quickly.
Yep.
And that the best recourse was to just not engage for whatever period of time.
Sure. Okay.
And again, I say that without having any understanding.
No, but that's why you and I work so well together. I go off half cocked and you're common sense. So it works. I guess I just want an arena. One more grievance.
Okay.
One more. Don't give me a 1,000 seat practice facility. Give me a 5,000 seat practice facility. They made that mistake in Edmonton. They've made that with the crowd now gone. That's the one thing this city doesn't have, is that 5,000 seat venue. And I know that they're going to build this, and in a couple of years we're going to go, oof.
Well, what's Winsport? What's its capacity?
2,900 or something, just under 3.
What's Max? So Max Bell's smaller than that then?
It's a 25 or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, so those are, and what's Seven Chiefs? How big is that?
So the gym?
No, the rink.
The rink, just about 2,000. Okay. Actually, it's 992 seats.
Exactly.
Because I did the manifest. Okay.
Yeah. So anyways, to me, like, that's a possibility of changing. I don't think anybody
sees any value in it other than guys like me that worry about arenas.
Well, but so guys like you, I think, have to speak up then in this particular instance for this particular reason and say, okay, this is what we have in the city. And listen, but there could be cost factors.
Oh, absolutely there is. But then do me this one favor. Humor me. Tell me that, it's 1,000, but we've built it in such a way that we can blow out a wall, we can do this, and it's ready to go for expansion.
Sure.
Because part of the Hitmen played 6 games out at Seven Chiefs this year because the Wranglers are here. It's not a big enough facility.
Right.
It's the right facility. It's just not big enough.
Right. So if we have a 5,000 seat, hey, the Arizona Coyotes, the Phoenix
Well,
Coyotes,
then we can get another NHL team,
could
can't
play
we?
in that rank.
No, but think about this. And I'm not bringing up anything anybody out. But remember, the Calgary Flames control the ice. So the Hitmen cannot put in, the Wranglers cannot put in logos in the ice from there. They have to defer that project.
Sure.
Then you have this whole other venture for signage and sponsorship and things like that.
But if you have the 5,000 seat arena,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And that's inside baseball. I don't think anybody's listening to this podcast going, "You're right, Rob." I think it's why is he so angry? He's mad about everything all the time. I want it in the worst way. I just feel like this time now you've gone and told me that I have to vote. Vote for this particular party. And I won't because of, I'm a fiscal conservative with social democrat beliefs.
But that got pulled back the next day.
What do you mean?
As far as, if you want this, you need to vote for me. So that
Did
was,
it?
yeah. So the following day,
No, you're telling me what you think.
I'm in my recollection.
Sure. There's not a test at the end. It's not one of your classes.
Thank God.
I'm not grading.
The premier, if I recall correctly, pulled that back in the following day and said, this is not dependent. It's she would hope that, whatever party was successful in the election would support and would go forward with
100%. And we get that all the time. So if the UCP don't, no. The NDP could make up the government. The Liberals could make up the government, the Alberta Party, but it would be on the docket. But it was written by another party. Yeah. And my problem is we live in a society right now that every 4 years is a teardown. Oops, they did this, so we're going to tear it down. We get back in. Oops, they did this, we're going to tear it down. And there's nothing that leads me to believe that any of the other parties are looking at this legitimately.
Well,
because they want again, and I'm sorry, I want Joe Clark politics. Like I want, the honorable opposition party who is there to do an honorable job, but not get in the way of everything. At some point as the opposition, you have to say, yep, this is good. Let's do it. But that's not where we live anymore. You said blue sky? No, God, no. We have a green sky. That's the crap we're living through right now. It's programs like this that created that.
Well, exactly. Quick Joe Clark story, if I may.
Please.
So I grew up in St. Catharines, Ontario, and my parents were big Joe Clark fans.
Yep.
And when I was in grade 8, maybe, we took a big family trip out west.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'd never been out west before. We flew into Calgary, and then we rented a car, and we were going to drive through the mountains up to Jasper, Edmonton, and back to Calgary.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, we had a day that we had open. And the two options that we had available to us as a family were either to go to Drumheller, to go to see the dinosaur in the Badlands, or to go to High River and see Joe Clark's house. And my parents took us to High River to see Joe Clark's house.
The first book without pictures that I ever read was in grade 4. I read Joe Clark's biography. And it took me forever. Okay, so the words were big.
Okay, so let me just return back though to your comment. Listen, if this is the kind of government that we want, we are voters. We can demand that of our government. And if we want our representatives to be thoughtful and to not be partisan and to consider decisions and ideas on their merit as opposed to political persuasion, we have the power to do that as a collective. Maybe I'm Pollyannish or what, but we do, and so
we should.
So if this is something that if having an event center, if having an arena is something that Calgarians dearly want, and then whatever party comes into power should respect that and should do whatever they can to enable that to happen. And so then it's up to that political party to determine and decide whether or not it is all Calgarians or the majority of Calgarians or some Calgarians or a few Calgarians that want this to happen. And also to be those dreamers and to sometimes make decisions that are perhaps not, supported by the majority or, are not universally loved. But at the end of the day, our leaders know that it's the right thing to do.
Meanwhile,
okay.
No, you know where I'm going to go. Fieldhouse and McMahon. Bothers me a little bit that the Fieldhouse, which has some funding now, hadn't had in the past, there have been other dispersions of cash here in the last little while that
Yep.
have impacted positively charities that I'm involved with. So I really don't want to get into it, but I've raised the same concern: is it a donation or is it a program?
Yeah.
What worries me is we're leading into an election and we're getting money.
Yep.
Next year, we're going to get cutbacks. Seen that movie before, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Wouldn't the Fieldhouse have been an easy one to throw some money at too in Calgary?
Yeah. Well, I shouldn't say yeah so quickly. I don't know. And listen, I am uber supportive of it too.
Me too, dude. Me too. And I'm uber supportive of both.
Well, and then you throw in McMahon State,
Which nobody talks about.
It's complicated and it's tricky, right? Because
Sure it is.
they all have different roles to play within a city kind of recreation sport facility.
They do.
Mandate.
They do.
I mean, I don't know if these have to be binary or if they have to be parallel or if they have to be somehow interconnected. And I'm not sure. I guess what I would hope is that they could all be achieved in some way or another. And I mean, the Fieldhouse, if we're talking about length of time by which we've been talking about it, I think you and I have talked about this before. I seem to recall us identifying that it had been on the docket, city council docket, since the 60s.
Correct. It is the longest unfunded project, the longest unfunded priority project in Calgary's history.
And McMahon Stadium was built in the 50s. I think
In
it was
100 days, in less than-
Mawada, yeah. So Mawada Stadium, and they built it in 100 days.
Yep.
And so it could likely benefit from some upgrades as well. Or
Did you say likely? No, well, let's stop right there. You're a season ticket holder?
I'm not a season ticket holder, but I do go to a number of games.
Finchy's a season ticket holder. Our
He
friends.
is. Well, that's when those are the number of games that I go to.
Right, okay. You're adjacent to season tickets. Let's put it that way.
I have a friend. Who
This
has
is what
tickets.
bothers me about the CFL and the Stampeder comment or the conversation is that everybody goes, wow, you look, the attendance is dwindling in Calgary. Yeah, but I don't think it's the product. It's the facility. The facility's a dump. God bless them. They built it in 100 days. God bless them. And it's done the Olympics. It's done all of this thing. But if you walk around and you have any sense of do it yourself, what can you do? There's not a lipstick big enough in the world to put on that pig. And but the problem, as I see it, is, well, we can't build something for 10 CFL games. That's where we need to get a little more ingenious. That's where Calgary next. And I know there's people go, well, if the Stampeders were in there, the public wouldn't get access. Okay. There needs to be some sort of thought process here of how can we build a facility that gets used 90 days out of the year?
Listen, I that Calgary Next plan and idea, with the exception of
the gift to the city, the creosote.
the creosote, that's
Yeah.
what it was. I was going to say formaldehyde, but I knew it wasn't that. Creosote.
We had sodium pentothal in the last conversation, so we're doing all the chemicals today.
if it had not been for the formaldehyde, for the creosote, that to me would have been just a great solution.
Yep.
To all these various challenges and barriers. So that's an unfortunate miss. But listen, stranger things happen. Maybe ultimately that's still a solution down the road.
Well, and I asked Ryan Pike, because Ryan Pike does a great job of covering this story, and he's been recognized by Elliot Friedman and others as the guy to follow. And I asked him, I said, this was at the beginning of the week when we didn't know this was happening. And I said, is there any chance that somebody might just stand up in city council and go, could we, like, any chance, like anybody? But he said, no, they're on separate paths. And it really appears. And what worries me is I don't ever like the Stamps are working so hard right now.
Yeah.
They are working so hard right now. Jay McNeil, their new manager of business operations, is everywhere doing everything. Like, dude is Batman.
Yeah.
And I don't think I don't think they're fighting the CFL product as much as they're fighting the facility.
Yeah. I really like McMahon.
Do you?
I do.
You do.
I'm
making a mountain out of a molehill.
Well, but I love the nostalgia. I love on a Friday night with the sun going down on a warm summer night. Now, maybe those are few and far between. But to me, it's a great atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I like the comfort of knowing where things are and the washrooms being what they are, and knowing where I can get my sausage with the onions. Like I don't know. I quite enjoy my times at McMahon Stadium.
Well, then again, I am not right about everything. I'm not. But I mean, I worked some stuff at the around COVID, and I was down there more than I had been, and I began to look at it in a different way. And I'm just looking at it like, you know what? And Wes brought it up earlier. Some of these conversations, you got to start putting TV in there, and you got to start putting home in there, and you got to start putting our schedules and our lives and things like that. That, do I really want to, I just don't like the facility, and nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, it does. It does seem to be a bit of a forgotten piece in the facility conversation. But again, it's just because in the last week we've had such a hyper focus on the arena.
Now I believe we have seen at times some plans, have we not, about building around that area?
Yeah, the city of Calgary has released plans, including the field house and where it would fit in, and then perhaps some changes to McMahon Stadium and just some of the walkways and some other facility development there. And that, again, could come to fruition.
Yeah.
But and again, they're complicated relationships because it's the city, it's CSEC, it's the University of Calgary. And so there's multiple parties that have to engage. And it's, again, not unlike what happened last week where you had, the city, the province, and CSEC having to agree. And I think that's why it was such you were saying you didn't love the celebratory kind of pomp and circumstance, but that might be in part why it happened, is because it took so
much energy to get it done.
That people were just like, we got to celebrate this. We got to show it off.
And that's fair. I just, that particular one was like, I don't know. I'm still gun shy, because of what happened the last time. Do we need to relitigate what happened back in 2021, 2022? With the whole, walking away from the deal and who was responsible for what and everything like that, because the city was on the hook for, again, I think you and I are both on the same page. It's not the same thing. Like what was proposed then and what they were doing then compared to what they're proposing and what they will do now are two different visions.
At the end of the day, though, too, we don't know what happened, right? We weren't.
I thought I did.
We weren't there.
No.
So we don't know what conversations took place. We don't, and people, and rightfully so, are tight-lipped. I mean, what happens, sometimes,
what happens in Vegas. You were about to say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. That's what you were going to say, weren't you?
No. I was going to, in a family, when my wife and I have conversations about things that relate to our family, sometimes those are private conversations just between her and me. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, the whatever happened to the last negotiation and why it did or did not succeed, I don't know the specifics.
I want to do this. This is a different part of the politics of all of it. This came out today. Gab, can you throw it up for me? From our friends up north, the Edmonton Oilers Group. We congratulate the city of Calgary and Calgary Sports and Entertainment Corporation. And the government. What do you mean, but? And the government reaching la. We look forward to working with the government of Alberta to identify opportunities of similar investment and support to ensure our continued success. I think Edmonton has the right to ask, what about us?
Sure.
Because remember, their project had zero Alberta money in it, province money.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back to the example that I was just talking about, though, with my wife and our kids.
Yeah.
I mean, so we have 3 sons, and we try as much as possible to be fair and equitable amongst all 3 of them. Context changes, circumstances change, situations change. And so we are not equal all the time. We try. I think that's kind of the the hope. But I'm sure it hasn't been exactly the same. This is why birth order is what birth order is, right? I mean, you change and adapt as you go. I get that Edmonton is cheesed off because they maybe, and I don't know the specifics there either. They perhaps didn't get the same funding opportunities that Calgary is getting.
Correct.
For when they built the Rogers Center.
Correct.
I would suspect that there are probably lots of venues across the province who built arenas or recreation facilities who would also like to have a similar opportunity. I don't know. I mean, I was watching the NFL draft last night, and you think about what draft picks are getting this year
Yep.
compared to 5 years ago.
Yep.
And so to go back and say, oh, I want what
They got.
they
Yeah,
got.
yeah.
But and it's their prerogative to ask.
So how far back can we go? Is there a statute of limitations?
Yeah, and this is where it gets
Well,
tricky,
no, because
right?
I want to go. If they got a Commonwealth Stadium, why do we get a Commonwealth Stadium?
Okay, and so yeah, so you can start. Yeah, so
You know what I mean? Yeah.
So where does it begin? Where is it?
I thought the best line to all of this was, "Shut up, Edmonton. You got McDavid."
Well, and if Edmonton, okay, this is, I don't want, listen, I went to the University of Alberta for my PhD and I have a lot of love for Edmonton.
I know,
but I remember,
I remember
a story. I remember a story that when Alberta as a province was being formed, there was the conversation about the same city could not have the Parliament building and the university.
Yeah.
And so the people that were kind of creating Edmonton at the time said, well, what we'll do is we'll put the university in Strathcona. So it's not in
the city. Yeah.
It's not in Edmonton, and we'll put the Parliament buildings in Edmonton. And yeah, so
it's semantics.
Where do you go back as far as fairness and equity?
Well, and the other thing I heard, and this was just heard, and it was kind of the day of I'd love to know where it came from, because you hear a lot of things, but this one, the day of this announcement, well, they're concerned up in Edmonton because some of the bigger acts won't come across the Rockies now unless they can go to 2 venues, and there's not a good enough venue in Calgary. So if we get a better venue in Calgary, then they'll come back to Edmonton. And I'm like, that seems awfully convenient. Like that's a ready-made. Well, that's why we're doing it. We're spending money in Calgary so you can have concerts in Edmonton. I'm like, that just seems a little bit made up to me.
Well, I don't know if it's made up, but it's certainly distal.
Convenient.
It's probably not an immediate cause and effect as to why Edmonton should support Calgary getting new events.
Yeah. Let's leave this for a second. Speaking of events, Commonwealth Games, is there any update, or can you bring us up to speed on what we will be seeing or could be seeing or are hearing?
Well, I think right now the bid committee is still creating a proposal to be considered.
Okay.
By the city councils in Edmonton and Calgary, Tsuut'ina Nation, Enoch Cree, First Nation, and then the province of Alberta, obviously. There is a website that's available with, kind of some information that will allow, interested people to both provide feedback and help create a bid that is reflective of the priorities and needs of all Albertans, and also to garner a little bit of understanding about what the proposed bid is going to look like. My understanding is that it's being worked on with the hope that a more fulsome presentation, a more fulsome, detailed proposal would be available probably early June.
Okay. So on track and going about the business and.
Well, it's a complicated.
Sure, it is.
Process.
Yeah.
To try to, we were just talking about Edmonton and Calgary. So the 2 large urban centers, but we also want to include the mid-sized cities. We want to include smaller towns and outlying areas. We want to include not just Enoch, Cree, and Tsuut'ina Nation, but all the the three nations, and all of the First Nations. We want to include, if it's going to be an Alberta Games, it has to be an Alberta Games. But going through the process to ensure that that's going to happen is one that requires a lot of thought and a lot of conversations. And so I think that's the process that's going through right now, is engaging with people, and then with a more fulsome public engagement likely to take place in June.
Okay. Well, you're here. I may as well ask you. One last thing. How about the Ottawa Senators now? Price tag's $1 billion.
Is Ryan Reynolds the owner?
Not the owner, but story was that they're linking his bid to that price tag, which is if you follow this story, it's very interesting, because I believe only Arizona was valued less in the Forbes list, the last Forbes list, and I think Ottawa was like $450 million American valued at. And then when they started this process, they might get to 800 million. And now they're over $1 billion. That's the Ottawa Senators.
Well, because it's a finite resource, and owning a professional sport franchise with people like I mean, like people like Ryan Reynolds
Sure.
and, you know, the Wexham and like the
Yep.
TV shows
Yep.
and all that stuff makes it attractive for a certain subset of the population, of which I am not a part of.
No, neither am I. But they're welcome to sponsor this program.
and the Department of Health and Physical Education. at
That's
Memorial
true. Sorry.
University.
Yes. We got lots of properties.
And so, yeah, but so if you want to be one of those owners, if you want to be the Steve Ballmer, if you want to be the Walton, you know, the owners of Walmart and own a pro football franchise, you got to be willing to pay a pretty penny. And it seems to me that there are enough of those people out there willing to do that. And so the market will bear what the market will bear.
I was always delusional when I was younger that, you know, I was going to win the Powerball or the, you know, the big lottery, and you win the $300 million. What are you going to do? I'm going to buy a hockey team right away. You know, well, that ship is sailed. Won't be doing that.
$3 billion isn't what it used to be.
No, it's not. Like it. 3 million. What's $300 million? What's that going to buy you now? Right. Since last we spoke, and we'll finish on this. We got you over to the pavilion.
Yeah.
We got you to Dungeon Wrestling.
Yeah.
As advertised.
Loved it.
It was great, wasn't it?
I loved it.
Yeah.
The atmosphere was great. I had never been in the pavilion before.
Yeah, no. Talking about old buildings and I am saying, well, McMahon, but the pavilion, you can't do anything with the pavilion. It's fantastic.
Loved it.
Yeah.
I loved the fact that Bret Hart was there sitting off in the corner.
Yep.
And I loved the connection to his family that kind of was interwoven throughout the whole evening.
Yep.
The wrestlers were awesome from
start to
bottom.
finish, right?
They were all excellent. The crowd was into it, but in a really fun and engaging and
well, you know what it does, David?
Exciting way.
There's no jumbotron, there's no ribbon boards, there's no prompting. It's just organic, right?
Yeah.
And it's like 1,000 people said, "Yeah, we'll go on this ride with you. Let's do it."
Yeah.
And there's like, I can't tell you how proud I was of Noah the goalie from Superheroes.
Sitting right in front of us.
Who, when we got him, was essentially nonverbal, wouldn't look at us, wouldn't talk to us. He got into a argument with the manager. Like, I'm watching this kid, and it was just so good for everybody. Yeah. I just, since we're down that path, here's my one suggestion, and it's the Stampede board, so they don't have to listen to me, nor would they. But I would like to see the front end of that building turned into a museum for pro wrestling. Oh, I think the history of that in our city with the Hearts and everything, I would like to see, and I'm inspired. Have you've been to Bret Hart's?
Okay, so I have not been to his new bar.
Oh, you haven't?
I have not.
Well, I wouldn't go in the evening because it would be busy. I would go when it opens.
Okay.
The pictures are to die for.
Okay.
They are everywhere, from everything of all eras, and some of them you've seen, and there's a bunch you haven't.
It is definitely on my bucket. Like, it's on my list.
I can't recommend it enough. Like, yeah, you go whenever you want, but to me, we got in there because we were doing a press event, a press conference, so it was before, so I could walk around unimpeded and look at all, and I mean, it's just amazing stuff from Japan, stuff from Stampede, lots of WWF and WWE stuff that you'd think you'd see, but you haven't. Lots with Owen, lots with Jim, all kinds of things. Like,
I found myself the other day, there must have been an anniversary or something to do with the feud between Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin, because there were a number of videos.
Well, that was on A&E. That was the rivalry series. That was the end of the season rivalry series.
Okay.
And it's good stuff. Now, for those who don't know, Bret comes and speaks almost every year to your class.
Yeah, almost.
He's been there.
Yeah.
He's been there. You also were part and parcel with him getting an honorade.
Right.
But did he not watch that WrestleMania 13 match with you guys with Stone Cold?
Yeah, he did. That's got to be. I just was today recognized for having taught at Mount Royal for 25 years.
Really?
Yeah. Can you believe it? 25
So
years.
You started when you were 16?
Yeah.
How incredible is that?
But anyways, so I'm just trying to put that into context, because that class where we showed the fight with him and Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he talked about it as we watched it. may be one of my favorite lectures, other than the ones that you've come down where we've done podcasts.
No, I think in fairness, I think that one. So the three that I would bring up for you after 25 years would be that one, because who else gets to sit there? Because for those who don't care about pro wrestling or don't understand pro wrestling or don't watch pro wrestling, that's a very significant match in the careers of both individuals.
Oh yeah.
There's no Stone Cold Steve Austin.
I don't think it was WrestleMania. I think it was
a Survivor Series.
Yeah. And it was in Chicago. I think
Okay. So is that the one that Brett made him, that he passed out?
No. Well, maybe
he was bleeding,
but they were
was
fighting.
Ken Shamrock in it?
I can't remember that either. I think that might be that. I don't know if that's the one.
Okay.
That's another.
Both of them are gems.
Yeah.
Like both of them. You're right. They were fighting and didn't Brett tell you a story about like falling down on the stairs or something like that? Like,
it was just so.
And then
awesome.
Ken King.
Yeah. Ken, and Ken King, I don't know if I've told the story on the air before. One of my favorite stories with him, and we just announced a new scholarship in his name.
Yeah.
And Marilyn King has been just so great to work with on this, as have the friends of Ken King and the
golf tournament,
the Flames Foundation in supporting this. But the story that I was telling about Mr. King was the one thing I remember about him is when I first came to Calgary, and I wanted to reach out to the people who I thought were the
decision makers,
important people.
Yeah.
And he embraced me right away. And I was a nobody. I'm still nobody, but I was a real nobody then. I was a new faculty member. I didn't have any street cred. I didn't have any kind of connections. That I had nothing to really offer him.
Sure.
But he totally welcomed me in. And so I would bring my students down to the Saddle Dome, and he would give us the tour.
Yep.
And he would engage with the students. And I remember being really taken with that. And then I invited him to come to campus to speak with our students. And he would do this thing where he would, look everybody in the eye and make them not sign an NDA, but basically a verbal NDA that anything that we talked about in class, they would not talk about outside class. Now, at the end of the day, I don't think he said anything that wasn't in the public.
But he wanted you to make
he had the students eating out of the palm of his hands. Yeah. Anyways, there was one class in particular, and this is going back maybe 20 years ago. And I just remember I had to leave at the end of class. There was something that I had to get to that was a non-negotiable.
Yep.
And so at the end of class came, and he was finishing up his conversation. And I said, Mr. King, I'm really sorry that I can't stick around to chat with you. I really have to leave campus to get to this appointment. But the students clearly didn't want him to go. And he looked at me and he goes, well, is there a class coming in after this class is done? I said, no, it's the end of the day. And so there's no other classes. And he kind of looked around the classroom. He goes, well, and he's saying this to the students, I'm happy to stay if you want to stay. And the students were all like, we want to stay. And so he goes, okay, Dave, you can leave. so I'm like, and I don't, I didn't have tenure. I was new. And I was like, oh geez, I'm not sure this is the greatest idea, but whatever. So I left. And I heard later that he stayed, 45 minutes after.
Yep.
Chatted with students. I have no idea what the heck they talked about.
That's Ken though.
But yeah,
that's Ken. And then the third one for me was Jesse Cole from the Savannah Bananas.
Yeah.
Because, I pray at that altar every morning. I get up and I pray to the Savannah Bananas. I think they're the greatest thing.
Sport is fun.
It is.
And he did it wearing his yellow tuxedo.
He does it always does that.
Oh my goodness.
But how good was he?
And how kind of him, again, to talk to a third year sport and rec management class at Mount Royal University in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, all the way from Savannah, Georgia.
Yep.
And he didn't know anything about us. And he just knew that I had reached out to him and asked if he would spend a little bit of time talking about what his vision was with the Savannah Bananas. And he agreed. And, I even said to him, I said, listen, I know you're a busy guy and all I want is 15 minutes. And I think he spent 45
easily.
hours.
Yeah.
And he was happy to do it. And, for those 45 minutes or whatever it was that he's with us, there was nothing more important. And that was the same with Ken King. And that's the same with Bret Hart. And I try to do that too.
Mm-hmm.
In all my engagements and all of my interactions, even with students, I will turn my chair around and I will face them and I will focus on them.
Won't do the, yeah.
And I think that's such an important lesson that I've gotten from some real mentors. We can talk about this for hours about the people that have influenced us in our lives.
Yeah.
But you've just mentioned 3 right there.
Yep. Well, what's happened here. We've solved nothing. We will get this right the next time. Dave, thanks so much. Appreciate you coming in and helping. There you go. David Legg, brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard. SkiCellarSnowboard.com, 76 years in Calgary. 3 locations, McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, 17th Avenue Southwest, just off of 14th Street, and Bow Ridge Road Northwest. All right, Monday, Will Nault, Ryan Pike. Next Wednesday, Peter Marr. Friday, Eric DeHatchuk, plus more. Final mile today. Just a reminder, my good friends at Parachutes for Pets have their golf tournament. And you know me, I love golf. Anyway, there's all the information. Check it out if you want to help out a great cause. August 24th at Speargrass. There's it's just going to be a fun day. I can't give you all the details because it hasn't been announced yet, but this is going to be a really cool and unique golf tournament. So give them a shout, get involved. That'll do it. We're a little past our time. Who knew I would go long yet again? Thanks to Wes Gilbertson, who was amazing. Thanks to Dave, who was amazing. Thanks to Jack, who's amazing. And thanks to Gab for amazing. And you know what? You're amazing. Don't let anybody tell you any different. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday, everybody.
When there's 2 sides to every coin, then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks, and some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fist at the clouds and cry, get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have